it was the hardest deal I've ever done, from agreeing on price to getting it closed. But I knew it was going to be extremely hard, so my offer was really low, and I told him that.
Hey guys, it's Brad. Welcome back to the Probate House Guy podcast. I am the Probate House Guy. Today I have my buddy Stinson Bland out of Waco, Texas. Welcome, Stinson. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, Brad, thanks for having me. About us first. Like Brad and I, we've known each other for 4, maybe going on 5 years now, to be honest. Um, I
Longer than that.
still remember our first call because you were one of the first guys to join Fuel.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great. That's right. You
yeah,
recruited Joel. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And you were one of the first people to join. So we've had a pretty long relationship. A little bit about me. Had a marketing company that specialized in finding accredited investors for private capital raises on Wall Street back. This is dates me a little bit, but we were doing this in the early 2000s. So I was using PPC before PPC was so easy. I actually had books and like had to study it and learn it. In '08, when the market crashed, um, my business evaporated that day. I remember the day Lehman Brothers filed bankruptcy. I was crying, and I was screwed, man. I was in my 20s, living well beyond my means, leasing everything, and just kind of a dumbass, to be honest. Didn't know what to do. I owed the IRS about $250,000 because I was a kid, man. I grew up and I didn't know. I never had any. My dad was a truck driver. I never had any influence in financials or anything like that. So called a good friend of mine. Said, "Hey, what should I do? I have about 100 grand. This is the hole I'm in." It's actually my business partner now. I'm in his building, his new
Okay.
building. Um, he was doing really well in real estate. Said, "Hey, you should look out real estate." Started calling around and ended up with Home Investors, a franchise in Dallas. Um, Bought a franchise in '09, started buying houses in October of '09. Had a development agent, Mike Cambright. And basically, that first couple of years, I was just working under Mike, listening to Mike, buying houses and assigning them to Mike. You know what I mean? I had a guarantee buyer and somebody that took interest in me and was coaching me up, and it was working really well. I was going out, I get the house, and you know, 4 hours later, I knew it was sold. Right, and that at that time, I was trying to dig out of a hole, and it was amazing. So, fast forward, I did home investors to about 13. Got into the info side of the business, started working with Mike on Flip Nerd, Investor Fuel, and all this other stuff. That relationship deteriorated over time, and I went back to buying houses. So I moved down to Waco from Dallas, and started focusing on building a portfolio. So I've been self-employed, obviously a dumbass when it comes to finances when I was younger. So I have no retirement. So I moved down here to start building a rental portfolio, and now I've moved into owner financing, which is I love it, and that's what I'm doing now. So that's a little bit about me.
And you have a little bit of a retail component in your business too, because your wife works with you, right? Like,
Yeah, so my business partner is a really big developer here in Waco. I mean, just for people to get some understanding of the size of development. He's doing about 600,000 square feet of commercial redevelopment right now. They built a little over 1,200 houses last year. I'm sitting in their new $4 million building. We just moved here 2 weeks ago. It's amazing.
nice.
They own a brokerage. They're developers. My fiance is a realtor underneath Shane. She does commercial and retail. Because of the nature of our business, Brad, you know this as well as anybody. Leads come in. There's a lot of leads we can't help. Paige is my lead manager. She's next door. Across the hall from her is Daniela, and we just live transfer right to Daniela and get listings that way. Because my business partner is a broker, Daniela pays me a commission on the deals that she gets. So it pretty, in theory, it should offset my marketing cost. It doesn't always, but it's nice to have a second revenue stream that way.
I always look at it as is it's also a nice place to hand off sellers so you don't just leave them hanging because like especially in probate 80-90% of the people are going to sell through an agent anyways.
Yes. Yeah,
So
not only that, like our core value, Brad, is people over profit. Like it's embedded into my team's mind. And most of the people that come in, like our offer isn't the right solution, right? Like
right.
it just isn't, and that's okay. Like we want to help people and we try to guide them the best way we can. We have a great team of attorneys here that know, like, and trust us. So, I mean, getting the leads to the right people to give them help pays off dividends for us for referrals, reviews, and just kind of our reputation. We're in a small town, so our reputation's very, very important. I mean, this very, very small town. So,
Absolutely. You made a good point there with having a good attorney. You've got to have, especially if you're doing probate stuff, like you've got to have a good probate attorney and a real estate attorney in your back pocket on your team because these deals, as you know, like they're can get pretty hairy, and
yes,
you better have a good legal expert that can advise you on what to do and how to navigate this.
it's funny, Brad. I got into a really hairy probate situation about 2 years ago. Ended up being the best deal of my life. Um, But my real estate attorney said, "Hey, you got to meet this guy from West. West is a tiny town, like 20,000 people right down the road." He's like, he's real eccentric. He's kind of a weird guy, but you got to meet him. His name's Jacob Straub, and he's my probate attorney. He geeks out on the more complicated and the harder it is. Like that's what he wants. Like a typical go to probate, that's not what he likes. Complicated cases, and he loves to do the work. He's young still, you know what I mean? He's not burned
Mm.
out as an attorney. So he's a blessing to have on our team. We actually have two leads that are with him right now. And the way when we have complicated probate cases, when we hand them off to Jacob, we tell the sellers that, hey, they have to pay his retainer up front. If he's able to get it to contract and we close, we'll cover the costs. But
Yeah.
we can't cover that. His retainer's $5,000. We can't cover that up front, not knowing that we can buy the property. But we do put in a contract that will cover it if we buy the property.
Yep. Yeah, that I've had we do kind of a similar thing, and I've had sellers burn me before where we've
Right.
paid their probate and then they get those letters, and as you know, until their administrator or executor, they technically don't have legally binding authority to enter in contract
That's right.
until they got those letters. So they could go squarely on you last minute. It's happened to me many times before. It sucks, but like it's gonna happen sometimes, and some of them don't always have the money to pay the 5,000 up front, and sometimes you got to front it if it's a really good deal. And
Yeah,
sometimes,
if it's a clean probate case, I have no problem. Like we can get probate pushed through for $1,400 here on a clean case through a different attorney. But the complicated ones, I'm not willing. Like I'll risk 1,400, but $5,000 is a much larger risk. 1,400, like if you put the money up and if they don't have 1,400 bucks, and before you know it, they're in front of a judge swearing to become an administrator, like you're on their team. Like they're for the most part, right? Like as long as they're good humans, as
yeah,
long as they're good people, like they know that you're fighting for them, so they should honor their obligations, right? But
yeah,
5,000 is a bigger price to pay, and when we go to Jacob, it's because it's really complicated and it's a long shot. You know what I mean? Like that's why we go to Jacob. So. And generally speaking, the deals that we send to Jacob are a lot more complicated. I will say that the one house that we might talk about, it was a six-figure deal for me. I did put up 2 grand. Like Jacob loved the case so much, and I'd done so much work on it that he took 2 grand as a retainer. He wanted the case. I'm telling you, he's a weirdo. He's like, oh, I love this, and so he took the
fun.
case for 2 grand. So, and I knew it was a huge deal for us, so I was willing to risk that there.
Yeah, and we've got probate attorney kind of partners because we do this sort of nationally. We generate these leads nationally, as I told you. Like we've got partners all over the country, and we look for the hunt. And I have a VA that kind of like helps hunt for those attorneys, and then we do some outreach to bring them into our network, and then also offer referrals. And one of the things I tell my VA to look for is like look for that like maybe 1 or 2 man shop that's
That's
like
what he is.
a go-getter. That's who we work. I don't want to work with the probate factory. I've used that term before. That's just
Yeah.
in
Yep.
probates. That's not who I want to work with. I want to work for the hungry attorney that loves the legal aspect. Like
Well, it's
because
funny in town, like there's again, we're in a small town, so there's one big estate planning attorney, and it never fails, man. When it comes from their office, like the heirship documents have to be redone, or like if it's probate, it's fine, it's approved by the court, the judge. But when it's heirship and stuff like that, my attorney has to redo the heirship they're a factory, you know. What I mean, they just have templates, and they're wrong for what we do. They're right for what they do. They're wrong for what we do. When it goes to title, they're wrong. Um, Jacob, I'll send you his information. So anything in Central Texas, he's the guy for sure.
Perfect. I'd love to talk to him. I'll probably have him on the podcast or something.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, he'd make an entertaining guest for sure.
so you mentioned airship, and that's not common in every market, but in Texas, you guys do that, have that airship. So why don't you kind of just, I know obviously you're not an attorney, don't take what Stinson says as legal advice, but like why don't you touch on
Yeah,
that a little bit about that's like a little bit of a fast track in Texas, let's call it in certain.
absolutely. So in Texas, I'm not an attorney. Don't quote me on any of this stuff, but it's a child a right to child state. So if somebody passes and there's not a will, there's actually a diagram, and I'll send this to you, Brad, so you can look at it. It's right in the niche you are. What's funny is my closers call me right now on a probate deal that we're dealing with. That's so funny. She's the one that'll send to you. But in Texas, if there's not a will, there's a diagram that breaks down exactly how the estate is broke down. And so all you have to do in Texas, if it's clean, is an affidavit of heirship. Meaning, if it gets complicated when people are divorced and have children, or if somebody passes and they have children. Sadly, some of our East Waco, which is kind of a lower income area, lower education level, there'll be like houses that have been in the family for 2 and 3 generations, but they've never changed hands. The deeds never changed hands. And we go to make an offer on it, and then we get into title. And it's like, oh, there's 26 heirs. We only have contact with 8 of them. The other 16, we don't even know who those people are because of the breakdown of the way the Texas law goes. Um, but in heirship, if it's super clean, like the house we're dealing with right now, father died, mother died, one child, so the child clearly gets the estate. All we have to do is an affidavit of heirship, and so we have to bring 2 disinterested parties. So 2 people that knew her parents for an extended time, generally 10 years or more, to come in and state, "Hey, I've known this family for 10 or more years, and this is the only child they had," and that's it. It's notarized by an attorney, and that's it. So, um,
Yeah, that's cool. We have something similar here in Georgia where I live, but the person has to have been dead for 3 years before you can do that. But if it's under 3 years, like it has to go to probate here in Georgia. I wish we could do that for those, especially the easy ones. But you mentioned some of the crazy ones of multiple generations. I've had those over the years. The most I've ever had, we had one a few years ago where there were 31 heirs involved, and the seller was like, I got him, connected with the probate attorney that I work with here locally, and the probate attorney's like, this is going to be like 10 grand to do this probate.
and at the end of it, you might get like $14 because it's being cut up between 31 people.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. So the seller was like, he had lived there. He got it, it'd been passed down and passed down. And it was crazy because it was in this really, really affluent area of Atlanta. And no joke, his house, this little tiny 2-1, was the last one on the street.
Surrounded.
Hadn't been demolished. McMansions all down the street. It was the last one. And he was like, you know what? Never mind. I'm just going to keep living here till I die, and somebody else will figure it out.
Well, it's not. I mean, when you get into those complicated situations, one, a lot of the people we deal with generally aren't like go getters. I just hate to say that, right?
Sure.
And then you go, hey, you have to track down these 24 people, and everybody has to be in agreement, which 24 people in agreement is next to impossible.
Heck
And
yeah.
when you're done with this, you're going to get 4% of the house because the attorney is going to get some too.
Right. It's not even worth it to them. So some of the, sadly, a lot of those houses end up just ultimately probably getting sold at tax auction eventually, which once they go through the tax foreclosure just wipes,
So
all
this
that.
is cool, and I think it'll resonate with what you're doing. Waco, that East Waco neighborhood and North Waco neighborhood, um, they're generationally, um, they've been taught to not trust the system generationally, right? So
Yep.
wills aren't trusted, courts aren't trusted, law enforcement, all that stuff's not trusted. It's generational. It's just the way it is. Waco knows it's a big problem, right? The city of Waco or the county of McLennan, really. So
Mhm.
they started a program called Tangle Titles, and they've actually the city of Waco is researching these because they want to start creating generational wealth. And if you don't have real estate, You can't do that, especially in a town like this where there's not a lot of money.
Yep.
So the city of Waco has a whole team finding these, what they're called tangle titles. It's that second, third generation inheritance.
Yep.
Um, and they're actually working through, they have attorneys working pro bono, cleaning up the titles so that these families can actually have real estate that they think they own it, but they don't, right? So
Right.
the city of Waco is actively out there cleaning up these titles and getting ownership to families. But to go through this program, you have to go through an educational class, and it has some financial education and things like they have to do some work on their part too to actually have the attorneys work for them so they understand what they're actually getting, which is really cool from the city of Waco.
That's awesome, man. I wish more places did that because I can't tell you how many times I've had a phone call with a seller and we have to break the bad news to them that like, yeah, your uncle did probate or whatever, but he didn't do it right. And
Yep.
it happenstance that 2 generations ago. So we're gonna have to fix all this and it's gonna cost this much, and you're only gonna get this much. And they're like, they thought they owned the house. Like oh, Uncle Steve gave me this house or whatever. And it's like, well,
It,
I hate to break it to you, but we got to clean this up, you
the
know?
worst is when they have like they say they have a will and it's like a handwritten piece of paper,
Yes.
Yeah, you're like, I understand that that's what your uncle wanted, but legally that piece of paper doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, it was notarized. I'm like, it wasn't recorded with the county, so it just doesn't, it carries no relevance in Texas. Very difficult conversations.
That's a great point. And I have told my team this because we've gotten burned on this before. If a seller tells you that, yeah, we finished the probate, do not ever take their word at face value. Ask for those documents. Get the, letters of administration or the letters testamentary. Get those documents because I have trusted a seller before early on when I was doing this,
Right,
and we get to the day before closing and we ask for the probate documents and they hand us a petition.
right, right,
Finished, right?
right. So in Georgia, can you guys search the legal documents, the court
Some
records?
counties, some
Yeah,
counties, yes. Other counties, no. It just depends. And some of them are available online, and some of them aren't. It really depends on where you're at. And we have a lot of counties in
right.
Metro. I mean, I
So for us, we can search pretty easily, and then obviously, without sounding arrogant, we do decent amount of volume here and have a good reputation in town. Our real estate attorney is also the owner of our title office and does all of our legal prep.
yeah,
I can text him and say, hey, can you just check this real quick? And he can check. He has access that I don't have, right? Like he has a clearance I don't have.
yes,
Um, so the reason I bring this up is not to brag, but somebody that's wanting to pursue probate specifically, they need to build a relationship with the title office that has an attorney on staff and build that relationship by doing repetitive business, making referrals to them so that when you need these little favors, you can just send a quick text and say, hey, can you check this? It takes them 5 minutes, but if you're a stranger, you're never going to be able to do that, right? So you kind of have
yeah.
this relationship.
That is a great point. And I've got that relationship. I've used the same real estate attorney for years, and he's
Yep.
a go-getter guy. He's also an investor himself. Like
Same
when I
with mine.
here in
Same with mine.
Atlanta, so he understands the game. He knows all that. And it's a quid pro quo, as they say, right? You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Throw them some business, they'll throw you business back. And then I can text my attorney, and he's got another attorney that works with him too. I've got their personal cell phone numbers. And I can't tell you how many times I say, hey, got a second? We get on the phone. Hey, this is this. And it's just a lead that just came in. I'm like,
Right.
this is the situation. What do you think? And they're like, oh, you need to do this, or hey, send me those documents. And in fact, we got one the other day. We're under contract with a deal right now. We'll probably make about $60,000 on this deal. At the end of the day, it's going to be a wholesale. And it was a weird probate, let's call it. And I
They
wasn't
always
sure.
are.
And I sent it to my attorney, and he looked at all of her docs, and because I was like, hey, I was letting her know, I was like, hey, I think I don't know if this is right. We might need to fix this, and that could delay closing. I sent it to my attorney. He looked at everything, and he's like, actually, I'm going to tell you good news. Like everything was done right. And I'm like, no kidding, really? For the first time ever. So we're closing on it like in a week. And that's
Awesome.
great. And because I have that relationship, I called him before we ever even signed a contract.
Right.
I could tell the seller, hey, we can do this. Like
Yeah,
we,
confidently I can get this done.
yeah,
And I want to back up a little bit. I can text Walt, but when I need a quick search, it's his junior attorney. Is that, you know what I mean? Like I'm not
yeah,
same thing. Like I don't text Walt for a quick search. It's the junior attorneys. But
yeah.
what's
But that
great?
relationship, right? That
Yeah,
relationship
absolutely.
helps you solve those problems quickly so that you stand out. Because you and I know, man. And why don't we parlay into this next thing? You've been through probate yourself,
Yes.
and you know how many letters and postcards and all the calls and the texts and everything you got. So why don't you kind of tap into that a little bit and tell us about?
Yeah. So my father passed 3.5 years ago. It'll be 4 years this June. Um, some interesting things happen. Um, when it comes to real estate investors and marketing, I want to say the most interesting thing that happened to me was within the first 30 days of probate being filed, I had received about 100 to 120. I can't remember the numbers now. 100 to 120 letters, right? The next 30 days, I had received like 60 letters. Within that 60-day period, I had barely buried my father and not even thought, like I knew I had to deal with all this stuff, the house and the cars and all this stuff, but it wasn't even top of mind yet. I was still processing, still grieving, still trying to understand, and still living life, right? Like things don't. It's not like my dad died and I'm selling the house a week later.
No.
We Day 60 through 90, I received 12 different pieces of marketing. So like everybody shot their shot in that first 30 days when I was actually emotionally upset at that time. I mean, I'm still upset, but like I was emotionally distraught, I should say. So those letters were just pissing me off, to be honest. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying don't send a letter in the first 30 days, but then the next 30-day cycle came through and the letters were, like down by half. And I was starting to think about it. But actually, in the period where I was able to start really processing it, nobody was marketing to me. Nobody. And I wasn't going to respond to this marketing, but I'm a student, right? So I was storing these. But it was interesting to me how many people had just shot one letter and then moved on. And Brad and I talked about this. I don't do probate marketing specifically, but if I was, it would definitely have a longer cycle than 30 or 60 days because I can't remember the exact timeline, but I think he passed. I know he passed on June 24th, and I think it was around November. And this is pre-COVID, so it's probably 5 years now. I think it was around November before I actually had the right. I was actually the executor of the estate. So anything that happened in that window before that had you know no relevancy because I couldn't, like you said, I couldn't do anything with it, nor was I ready to.
Yeah. Yeah. Emotionally, you weren't ready. You had so much stuff on your plate to deal
Yes,
with. And
yes,
it's so many, and I've mentioned it before, like my best deals come from people who have been on my list for like over a year.
right. Well,
And
like in my situation, my father lived in my grandparents' house.
yes,
My father was also a mechanic that he wasn't a hoarder, but good Lord, like, why do you need four transmissions? You know what I mean?
that one
so,
breaks,
so
got the other one.
yeah, exactly. Um, but my father lived in my grandparents' house. Just imagine the amount of stuff that was there. And it's not like, hey, you bury your loved one, and the next week you go clean out the house, right? Like I let all my aunts come over and go through the stuff. Like, you know what I mean? I went through his stuff first, and I was like, hey, there's two generations of family heirlooms here. I don't want china. I don't want antiques. Like then I was letting the family come take what they wanted, and then I had to figure out what to do with his tools. You know, what I mean, there's a process that most people think like, hey, somebody died, the house is vacant, it's ready to sell. That house sat vacant for a long time because I was still processing the emotion side of it and all the material side of it, right? Like there's a lot of stuff there. So
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
I think that marketing long term, until I assume you're doing this, but until the deed transfers, you just keep marketing to them.
Yes. Yeah. We consistently do it. We have it on a specific cadence. We also base it off of like how long it's been since they filed the probate. They get the cadence changes depending on that. But you made a good point there with all the stuff. I would say that 9 out of every 10 houses we buy have come with a whole lot of stuff because the sellers go in and they get what they want. They get the heirlooms, they get the other thing, but 90% of the rest of the stuff is just junk to them and they don't want it.
I
And
mean, I have three probate houses in escrow right now. Two are from one family and the other is a separate one. All three of those houses are full of stuff. One is full of nice stuff that we're like I'm actually selling a car right now. I'm selling furniture. They're full of stuff, and most of it's junk, right? Like it's the same situation. Like it's insane. But when you build rapport, me going through probate with my father, one of these houses I was able to get because they instantly knew I knew what to do because I could talk like I wasn't speculating. They could tell I was speaking from my heart. Like I understood what they're going through. They're out of state, so I'm helping them with their car and their furniture and stuff like that. So it's not just about the houses with these people. It's about, hey, can you actually solve their problem and do you know what they're actually going through? Which
Yes.
you've done so many probate deals, you do know.
Yes. Yeah, it takes experience. It takes some deals under your belt, but and you should still educate yourself. Like sometimes I nerd out and I go read the inheritance laws and stuff so that when those come about, I can give the seller somewhat of an answer up front. And then obviously I'll refer them to my attorney and I'll tell them, look, I'm not an attorney. Don't take what I say as legal
Right,
advice. I kind of can already answer their questions. And I've trained my people to do that too
right.
when they're talking on the phone with that seller. And the seller immediately recognizes that. They
Absolutely.
immediately see that you know what you're talking about and you're not just that Yahoo or sent them a postcard or a letter trying to buy their house and shows up and only talking about the house. It's not about the house,
Yes.
especially in these situations where they're going through a tough time. It's about the seller and their needs, and you better listen to them and figure out what their problem is and help them solve the problem. And you'll buy the house for a way better deal than anybody else.
Right. It's crazy. A house I have right now, they called in Monday. We're going to close next Monday. They called in this Monday.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
generally, my leads manager knows that I don't do same day appointments unless the urgency is high, right? Like I have other stuff going on. I can't just drop everything and run. She came in here and she said, "Hey, this is really sad, but they don't have the money to bury mom. They own a bunch of real estate. They want to sell one of their houses." I'm like, "I'm gonna get my car. You tell me where to go." You know what I mean? Like that. That's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
that's a hot lead.
Yep.
But with our experience and my relationships with the title office, the fact that we're closing on Monday, like they had other investors coming over there. I was first to the door. And once they like knew that I could get it done, and I was really because I asked the right questions, right? I knew that she was the only child. I knew that father had passed. I knew that mom had passed. Like I knew that that property was hers, and that we could get it done with the affidavit of heirship. And I could confidently say that I had the attorneys in the title office that could get it done in a week. And so they called and canceled everybody coming out because they made the deal right there. And the house is really rough. And they told me what they wanted. And it took everything in myself to do this, but I actually paid them more.
Yeah.
They were willing to take 35. I'm like, I cannot it's right here. We're paying them 48. I'm like, I would love to have it for 35, but I'd be doing you a disservice. Like I don't it's still gonna be a good deal for us. I mean, it'll probably be a 40 grand wholesale once we clean out all the crap and get rid of the raccoons, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a good
right, right.
deal. It's a good deal. But I didn't even think about it before we got on here. Every house, three of the houses, I have four houses in escrow to close this month, or the next 30 days. And three of the four are in probate or inheritance, and the fourth was inherited, but it's already like we're not doing any complicated title work. It's already done. So um,
Mhm.
most of the houses we buy are from this, kind of channel.
Yeah, and that's I mean that's huge there. And you know what, when you gave them more money, you further reinforced that deal too. The one I just told you about that we're closing next week, we did the same thing.
Yeah,
We offered the seller this price and she said, "Well, I was actually expecting less and I'm still going to make 60 grand on the
right.
deal, man."
That's right.
Like I'm
That's
still
right.
making that's a great deal.
This house is worth 150 fixed up. It needs to be cleaned out, and it's a small house. We're up paying 48. I'll relist it for 89 and probably get bid up to 100.
Yep.
That's that's just what the market is here. So
And that
uh,
speaks volumes to just integrity. And that's what matters the most and what, especially in probate, really in any real estate deal for that
yes,
matter. When you have integrity, you stand apart from the rest of the pack. And there's anybody can offer cash and close quick and blah, 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 blah. But people see integrity and really care about integrity. And that's what wins like deals for sure.
Brad, and what's going to be like Miss Bradshaw, like every time I talked to her this morning, she cries every time I talk to her because I've been so great to her, right? And I have been great to her, but I'm also making a good chunk of change.
Sure.
But she doesn't have the ability, computer savviness to write a review. I promise you that I'll be able to help her write a review and help her post a review. And I can't wait because the review is going to say he offered me more money than I asked. And that's a factual statement. And I'm going to take that review and use that in my marketing. Like one of our postcards has reviews on it. Like what review better than they offered me more than I asked, right?
Yeah.
Like that. And like there's a bunch of wins that come out of that, not just the getting the deal, but that integrity, the referrals I'll get and things like, well, I don't know if I'll get referrals from these people, but
Really
um,
well.
yeah, they're kind of closed off in their house pretty good. They're hoarders, by
Yeah.
the way. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
that integrity carries a lot of weight in this business, especially when there's so many shady wholesalers. In my market, there's a lot of Instagram, TikTok wholesalers that are just integrity is like not even in the realm of things
No.
they're concerned with.
Yeah, and they're gonna offer the seller like some ridiculous amount of money, and then they're gonna try to wholesale the deal and make 50 grand, and all they're gonna do is mark up over what they locked it up for, which is not even a realistic price. And they're
Yes.
gonna waste the seller's time for 45. I saw a contract the other day. They had a 60-day due diligence. I'm like,
With $100 of earnest money, probably.
no, no, no earnest
Oh,
money.
nice, even better, even better.
Like, what is this crap?
Well,
So,
I will say this: in the state of Texas, that you have to have earnest money, and it has to be receipted at a title office to be a valid contract. So if somebody's like, "Hey, I want to work with you, but I have a contract," I'm like, "Send it over to me." You know, like they're calling us because they're already upset, like they already feel like they're being burned or misled. Like,
sure.
send me the contract and let me see. You know, like if it's a real contract and they put up earnest money, did everything right, there's nothing you can do. But if it's some BS wholesaler, downloaded it off Bigger Pockets contract with no earnest money, it doesn't swing weight in Texas, so.
Oh, I've gotten so many deals where a seller has we weren't their highest offer at the appointment, right? But they could see that we were trustworthy and we continue to follow up with them. And when their contract went south with that wholesaler or offered them crazy money, they came to us and asked us for advice. And I look at their contract and I'm like, this isn't even like a legally enforceable contract. Like there's no legal description. There's no earnest money. Like
Right.
the verbiage is like, it's a joke of a contract. And I'm like, look, like I can't tell you what to do here, but I'm just saying like this is not like legit. If you'd like to sell us the house, we'd be happy to chat with you, once you kind of deal with your situation with them. I'm not going to tell you what to do here, but like you
Yep.
deal with your situation with them and we're here for you if you need us. And they come back to us.
A lot of our leads come back, but I personally do the acquisitions. Part of my whole sales process is like I tell them, and this is the cheesiest line contractors tell me all the time. I hate it, but it's just a fact. It's right. I'm not going to be your highest offer, or I'm not going to be your lowest bid, right? From a good contractor.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be your highest offer, but what I sell is certainty. It's like if you work with me, we put $5,000 in earnest money. There's no way for me to get out of the contract. Yada yada yada. I said, I understand that this might be the biggest financial decision of your lifetime, and you deserve to get the most money possible. If you feel like somebody's offering more and you're confident they can close, you should go with that. I would. But if it doesn't work out, you can always come back to me. And my offer is good for 60 days. I'll honor it. After 60 days, I have to look at the market and see if something's changed. But I tell them, and it probably hurts me. I'm like, go out, get the most money possible. But I also give them, I don't have it on this desk, but I give them a really nice printout that shows them how to catch wholesalers and
yep,
things to look for. Like we put 5 grand of earnest money. It says like if they're not willing to put 5 grand of earnest money, don't do it. I know most of the guys in my town don't have 5 grand. Like,
no, no, yeah,
and then it shows them and/or signs. It shows them, weasel clauses of term inspection periods and due diligence periods and things like that. And so what I try to do is separate myself. Once I've built that rapport, I try to separate myself, saying, "Hey, look, I might not be the highest offer, but when we shake hands and sign this paper, you know it's gonna happen or I lose $5,000. Whether you trust me or not, I'm not willing to give you $5,000. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure. Yeah. We do the same thing with our deals. We give them a spiel and we say, look, you're going to get a lot of offers. We're
yeah,
not going to be your highest offer. And, we're here we kind of say the same thing you
right,
do. And we also, my acquisitions guy says, I've got column B, which is heart over here. We actually like truly want to help you and help you with whatever you need. And I know that sounds cheesy, but like
yeah,
we build the trust and we get a lot of good deals and we're there to help them when the deal goes south. And they see that. Like sellers see that and they
yeah,
want we tell them you need to list with a realtor.
right.
Like we were
Get the
talking
most
to
money possible.
I've told him 4 times, you need to sell that house with a realtor. He's like, I don't want to do it. He's going through a nasty divorce. And I'm like, your house is nice. Like, you don't
Yeah,
need to sell this house to me. I don't need to buy your house, you
right.
know? And he still keeps chasing us and says, I want you to, I want you to buy it or whatever. So that matters. So, dude, we've gone through so many like gold nuggets here. Why don't you talk about your kind of best probate deal you've ever done, and we'll kind of close it out from there. So you had
Cool. Um, the craziest thing is that this lead came in on a Saturday, and I don't take, I am acquisitions, but I don't answer the phone. But this Saturday, this is a couple years ago. This Saturday, I was like, I don't know, I answered the call, and this call lasted like 2 hours. The guy was cool. He was a vet, super cool dude. Um, and he had 10 acres with a big house, 2,600 square foot house, custom built, out in Elmont, and which is a town outside of Waco. And the situation was really weird. He had taken care of somebody, this lady, and she had willed the property to him, but he wasn't family, and the family was really upset that he had the property. So it was really complicated. This is where I hired Jacob because
sure,
um, the will was not professionally done, but it was recorded with the county. So it was all these gray areas.
sure.
Long story short, it took us about a year. I looked at my call rel account. I had over 60 hours of phone work dedicated with this guy. Like, I mean, but we had really good rapport. So our calls would always be like an hour or 2 hours. It was just one of these weird, it was really complicated. And like, the craziest thing is that we had to get all these uh, witnesses together, and these are rednecks in a small town. And I was like, "How am I gonna get them?" He's like, "Man, if you just say free pizza and beer, they'll come." So we literally in West Texas, the town, had a beer and pizza party, and they all came. We had a notary there, and they all came and signed, and it was
Yeah,
just it was a ton of work. But that house, I turned it to an Airbnb. I put cattle on it. I'm not a rancher, but I pretend to be. Put
cool.
cattle on it so I could I avoided all my taxes with that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
On the land. Ran it as Airbnb, planned on keeping it. Market went absolutely bonkers here in Waco, and I sold it. I think here I can tell you. I don't want to slow this down, but it was like 160 or 180 is what we netted, like net
wow,
at the end of the day. And that's not accounting for the profit that we had when we were running as Airbnb. I will
sure,
never do an Airbnb again. Too much work, like too much BS for me. Um,
yes,
but the point of that story is that it was the hardest deal I've ever done from agreeing on price to getting it closed. But I knew it was going to be extremely hard. So my offer was really low. And I told him that. And he was in a situation where he had invented this thing. This is pre-COVID or like right at the beginning of COVID. He had invented like this hat mask thing. And he wanted the money so bad because he was going to make money off of COVID.
yeah,
He wanted to patent it. So he was willing to take my offer. And that was the one where I put up the money. I put up the 2 grand. That's where I met Jacob. I was like, I can't put up five. I can do two. And Jacob looked at everything and crazy situation. But fun rehab. I got to pretend I was a rancher for like a year. I got to realize that I don't want to Airbnb houses at all.
sure.
Um, the coolest thing out of that whole thing, I love making money, but the coolest thing, Brad, is I plan on like using that property for ourselves. We never use it, but I
Yeah,
bought everything, dude. Like all
yeah,
the like chainsaws, all this. So when we sold it, I got all this amazing equipment at my
sure.
own, my personal house too. So,
That's
um,
awesome. I love that story, man.
yeah,
That's great. You made some good points there too. Like Airbnb being it can be super profitable, but it's a business, and you
yeah, it's a
better
business.
ready to run it like a business,
Yeah.
it's different than, and flipping and regular rentals. Like it's a whole different
I
animal.
mean, I have dozens of rentals and dozens of owner finance notes. That Airbnb is way too high impact,
Yep.
especially maybe it'd be easier in like a condo or in the city, but having it kind of rural with cattle and just all the stuff that goes on out there, like, oh, somehow we have cows that are loose. Like, who's the dumbass that who let the cows out? You know what I mean? Like, I don't even like cows. I needed cows so I didn't have to pay property taxes, like,
Right.
uh, but I'm glad I learned that lesson, I mean, I know in 10, 20 years, I wish I owned that 10 acres, yada, yada. But at the
Sure.
time, it was the lesson I needed to learn. And that money allowed us to get into owner financing.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a catalyst.
That's killer, man. And you sticking with it because you knew it was going to be a good deal. Most of those idiot wholesalers that are making offers to these
Oh, yeah.
people are not going to stick through these
No.
deals. They will bail as quick as possible because they don't see that payday happening in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Well,
Whereas,
and they don't have 2 grand to go give the attorney.
right, exactly. So
Um,
that's awesome, man. I love that story. So, dude, we've covered so much today. Like, I appreciate you coming on. And
Likewise.
so, guys, again, I'm Brad, Probate House Guy. I actually have a unique way that I get probate and inheritance deals all over the country. And I work with partners all over the country like Stinson who share the same values as me. And I get these leads and I can't deal with them. So if you're interested in working together, please go to probatehouseguy.com, fill out the form. Stinson, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you? Because you're a good dude, man. You've helped me so
I
much.
appreciate that. I have a unique name, so you can find me on social. Stinson, Stinson, Bland, Bland, like a tasteless food. So I don't have anything. I'm just a regular guy just trying to build a retirement off houses here in Waco, Texas, and live a quality life. Just real quick. I was born and raised in Dallas. I never thought moving to a small town would be my thing, and I absolutely love small town living.
I remember
So
when you moved to when you told
yeah,
when you told me one day you're like, yeah, we're moving out to Waco, and I was like, really, man? You're
yeah.
because you're a city boy. Like I've known you for years, man. You're a city boy.
I lived in a condo in downtown Dallas for 18 years. So imagine going from a downtown condo to a town of 200,000 people. I thought it was going to be shock. Luckily, we did it during COVID, so everything was shut down. So it wasn't
Yeah,
that
yeah,
huge shock, but the
sure.
quality of life is so high, and there's no traffic, and people are just generally way nicer and less like douchey. just,
That's
just
awesome.
I don't know how to say it another way.
Sure. That I live out a little bit, a little
Yeah.
bit out too. I enjoy it. I don't have any desire to go back like towards the urban area. I like, living a little bit out, not that far
Well,
out.
and you built a badass house too. So
Yeah, yeah. I'll do an episode about how I did this, and this was a real estate deal I did, and now I live here. So,
it's
hey, man,
amazing.
thanks for coming on, Stinson. I really appreciate your time. And if
Likewise.
anyone wants to get a hold of him, just reach out to him on social. Thanks for checking out another episode of the podcast. This is Brad, Probate House Guy. Have a great day, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad.